City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded April 5, 2021.
Sure.
Sorry about all this.
I have 6:01. We will call the meeting to order. We've been live since 6 o'clock, so we are covered. The agenda is super small. Ryan, can you fix that?
Well, first item is a roll call, Mayor.
I understand that, but I can't even, I doubt anybody else could read what's on the agenda. Are you able to make
go to the next slide?
Okay. Then I will do a roll call, or I'm sorry, I will ask Director Kronosky to do a roll call.
Louisa.
Here.
Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Oh, I'm here. Did you get that?
Is. Okay.
There we
Cooper.
Here.
Haynes.
Here.
Hoppy.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum and we will continue. Item number 2 is on page 3 of your packet, Commissioners, and that is the report of the March 1st meeting of the City Plan Commission.
Mr. Mayor, this is Cooper. I would move approval of those minutes in action as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooper. Is there a second?
Yep, I'll second. Arnson will second.
Seconded by Arnson. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, Commissioners, please unmute yourselves. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Item number 3 is on page 12 of your packet, and that is a public hearing with subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point for a conditional use permit to construct a restroom facility at Iverson Park with the address and parcel identified consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 1, Sub A, Sub 3, Sub A. Director or Associate Planner, one of you want to give us an overview of this reconstruction?
Sure. So the city's Parks Department is currently in the process of constructing a new restroom facility at Iverson Park. They are seeking to replace the existing facility that's adjacent to, I believe, the softball field in the center of the park. The construction is anticipated to begin in fall or summer or fall of 2021. There was a concern about some floodplain elevation, but working with Dan Kramer through the Parks Department and some other folks, we have found a location for the new restroom that's out of the floodplain. And so mainly because of the zoning, any type of construction of new structures within the Conservancy District does require a conditional use permit. So you can see where the location of the proposed restroom is and the building elevation on the right-hand side. You can see where the existing restroom is. This is really just northeast of where the current facility is. So with that, staff believes that it's consistent with our comprehensive plan, would recommend approval of the conditional use permit after the public hearing is held, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. From the Commissioners, any clarifying questions? Director Kramer is also here from the Parks Department if we have any questions prior to the public hearing.
Mayor.
Alder Kneebone?
Since this is a wonderful little park in my district, I use the term little sarcastically. It's a great park. This is a good project. It's something that's very needed. So I would move to approve.
No, Alderperson.
I'm sorry?
We have a public hearing that we need to go to.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
I was just looking for
Gotcha.
questions regarding the project prior to opening the public hearing. All right, with that, I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this public hearing is asked to unmute yourself or raise your hand, signify somehow that you'd like to speak. Alder Nabel.
How do you see me?
How do I see you?
Yeah, how
You're
did you
on camera.
see me? I guess I see only this screen. Sorry about that. Good, thanks for telling me just in case. No, I just wanted to know, is this part of our, it was already in the financing for this year?
So Alder, this is a public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking testimony. We'll answer your questions after the public hearing is closed,
Gotcha.
but the quick answer is yes.
Okay, thought so. Thank you.
Public hearing remains open. The public hearing is still open. And for the last time, the public hearing remains open. I'm scrolling through the pictures on the sides just to see. Okay, seeing no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission for your consideration. Alder Kneebone, I suspect you have something to say.
Yes, I'm sorry. Has it been only a couple of weeks since we had our last meeting? I've totally forgotten the protocol. I would like to move to approve this project with staff recommendations.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Alderman Hoppy will second.
Alderman.
Alderman. Okay, I'm suddenly Alderman. I've lost it too. Commissioner Hoppy will second. I am not running.
Public comments and banning public comments and things like that. Let's all take 30 seconds maybe and just regroup. We're going to be good.
Commissioner Hoppy will second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Kneebone and a second by Commissioner Hoppy to approve the request from the City of Stevens Point for a conditional use permit to construct that restroom facility at Iverson Park. Are there any other comments or questions? I know Alder Nabel had a question regarding financing, but I answered that. It is in our capital plan that was approved by council last fall. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none, commissioners, unmute yourselves. And if you are in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Item number 4 is on page 33 of your packet, and that begins with a presentation from Lineage Logistics, followed by a public hearing, and then subsequent action by the commission on a request for a conditional use permit to allow a meatpacking to occur at the premises of 5700 EM Cops Drive with the parcel identified consistent with chapter 23.02, sub 3, sub B, sub 3, sub E. Director Konoski, do you want to kick us off, or are we going to turn it right over to Mr. Doby?
I'll kick it off, and then we'll turn it over to Lineage. So this is back before you tonight due to an administrative error of including it on the agenda, but not having it properly publicly notified for a public hearing. So I regret this miscommunication, this issue to Lineage and to the commissioners that we have to see this item. But in order for us to take any formal action, this does need to go through a formal public hearing process. So the body has seen this a few times, and really there's no significant changes. But for the public that's on the call tonight, what's before us is a request from Lineage Logistics for a conditional use permit to allow for meat packing to occur at 5700 EM Cops Drive. That's the current Lineage Logistics facility. This would be a future expansion further east than what their current facility is. And I will let Les touch on this a little bit later, but what is essentially happening is product, meat that is refrigerated is coming into the facility. It is being further cut and packaged, frozen, and then sent back out. It's really important to note through some of the communication that we've had with members of the public and members of the county with the Portage County Business Park that there is no slaughtering occurring at this facility. There is no storing of livestock. The product that is coming in is refrigerated or frozen. It is then cut down, packaged. As some of you may know, Lineage Logistics is a deep freezer, essentially, company where they take frozen product, they keep it frozen, and they use it for distribution all over the Midwest. And so the staff report in front of you tonight isn't any different than what has been provided previously. The conditions are still consistent. At Lineage Logistics' request, we would actually recommend an additional condition that no livestock or slaughtering occur at the property. If that were to occur, They'd have to go through another process, another conditional use at a different time. Les, I'll turn it over to you if you've got any other comments on top of what I've provided the commission.
Okay, thank you, Director Kanowski. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the committee. I think it's important for people to understand that when there's a different activity involved, and I'm just going to briefly tell you the reason for a different classification within the USDA is anytime you change the configuration of the protein, their main concern is food safety and traceability. It's a standard of identity, and it is making sure that any of the ingredients, additives, whatever goes into that package is safe and suitable, and it is kept track of. And that is one of the things that is a forte of ours, is keeping track of that. So this really is a food safety issue. And again, like Ryan said, I had offered up, if there are concerns about anything having to do with live animals as a condition of the permit, we are certainly in alignment with that. That is not our intent. Our intent is to be correct in our licensing with the USDA, which then through the vernacular of that licensing refers to us as a meat processing plant. So I guess I'm going to let it go at there. It's really pretty simple. And I understand the concerns that people have. So if there's any questions, I'd be open to any of those at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Dobie. And we may get to that after the public hearing.
Sure.
Right now, from the commissioners, I know you've seen this before. Again, we're back because of a legal notice oversight. So we're looking at it again to have the public hearing now. But are there any other clarifying questions that are needed from the commissioners before I open the public hearing? Okay, at this point, I will open the public hearing and declare.
Sorry, you didn't see me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Commissioner Haynes.
Yeah, I must have missed the meeting, which I did last month. So anyway, I do see that there's wastewater sampling. And so it does talk about meat processing and taking large packages and putting them down into smaller packages. So I'm just wondering, is part of the waste pieces of whatever, bone, who knows what?
Sure, let's get to that after the public hearing, Commissioner.
Sure, okay, that is my question.
Okay, Director and Mr. Dobie, please take note of that, and we'll get that after the public hearing. Again, the public hearing is declared open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, please unmute yourself or signify somehow that you would like to offer testimony. Identify yourself, and we can talk about the project. Public hearing remains open. And for the third time, the public hearing is open. Seeing no one wishing to speak, we will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Director Lemke from our wastewater utility, could you talk about the waste stream potentially?
You bet. So we actually reviewed this plan with Lineage and early on said that there'd be a sampling station that could be required in further evaluation of it. And they've shared samples from other similar facilities and process type information. We've determined that it isn't even a big enough concern right now that we need a sampling station in place. So we've accounted for where one would go in the future if anything got to the point where we were concerned about it. But as of this date, it's not required.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dobie, anything to add there? I think we got it pretty well covered.
You got it. Commissioner
Haynes, did that answer your question sufficiently? Thank you. Again, this is not a slaughterhouse. It's I know it can sometimes have an interesting connotation to it when we talk about meat processing, but this is not what that is. Okay, commissioners, bringing it back to you. What are your wishes?
This is Cooper. I would move approval of the conditional use permit as requested, subject to staff recommended conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooper. Is there a second?
This is Arnson, and I'll second.
Seconded by Arnson.
Mayor?
Yes, Director.
Just for the record, does that include the sixth condition, which would include no keeping of livestock or slaughtering of livestock on site?
I believe so, but I will direct that to Commissioner Cooper. He said with staff recommendations. Commissioner Cooper, is that correct?
Correct.
And that is acceptable to the second, Arnson?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Item number 5 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend the official street map of the City of Stevens Point to extend EM Cops Drive 100 feet to the east. We had talked about this one before, but Director, please refresh our memories.
This is an existing extension of EM Cops Drive, part of the certified survey map before we sold this piece of property in East Park Commerce Center to Lineage for their 4th and 5th expansions. Did include dedicated right-of-way. Because the official street map is really how we do a lot of our future planning, it's appropriate to include it as part of the mapping system itself. So this is more of a formality, but would recommend approval after the public hearing for the extension.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm going to assume that there aren't any questions since we talked about this one before as well. Then I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, please identify yourselves and provide that testimony. Public hearing remains open. And for the third time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing and hearing no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed. Bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Commissioner Hoppy will move approval with staff recommendations.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Haynes will second.
Seconded by Haynes. Discussion. Hearing none. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm sorry, any opposed? I think I heard just a mic flick or something, but I wanted to be sure. Okay, that is approved. Item number 6 is on page 58 of your packet, and that is a public hearing with subsequent action on a request from Kyle Brettel, representing the McDill Inland Lake District Protection and Rehabilitation District, to dredge the northern portion of McDill Pond located at the parcel ID identified in your agenda. Director Kronoski, we have to do this every couple of years to get the silt out of there, but give us an overview.
I'll actually turn it over to the associate planner for this one.
Yeah, so to give a little background here, the state DNR has already reviewed the proposal submitted by the applicant to dredge up to 90,000 cubic yards of sediment with the soil stockpile area that will show on the next screen, being able to hold approximately 35,000 cubic yards of material. We'll just bump over to the next site plan here. So the image shown on your screen is the proposed improvements, use of the property for the dredging related purposes. You can see the soil stockpile area, the equipment area for the dredging purposes. And then here provides more of an overarching view of the areas for which sediment is going to be pulled out of McDill Pond, showing the approximate volumes upon each area, working its way from the bridge along Patch Street down southward. So overall, as we mentioned in the staff report, dredging is considered a conditional use given the subject properties falling within the Conservancy District. The applicant has been working with Director Kramer and his staff for a lot of the procedural motions because of the property's use as a disc golf course. So overall, staff does recommend approval for this request, subject to the conditions shown on your screen.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the commissioners before I open the public hearing?
Mayor, I have a quick question.
Yes.
I believe I read in the packet that it will not affect the disc golf playing there. Is that correct?
It shouldn't. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
I mean, it won't completely disrupt it, will it? Or
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so the plan is for right now that it will not impact at all. Now, one of the components that will be subject to this condition of approval is that a more robust, more detailed project schedule is produced by the contractor once they're identified come early spring of 2022. So in terms of once a contractor is scheduled or is sought after and a schedule is produced, then that contractor will be working with Director Kramer to work on the specifics as far as, which specific areas of the disc golf course could be used at the times during when dredging activities are taking place.
Does that answer your question, Alderperson? Good. Yeah, the most common thing is going to be the heavy equipment moving in and out of there. And unless you're a bad golfer, it probably shouldn't be an issue. Right? All right. I will now declare the public hearing open.
Well, Commissioner Arnson, I got a question.
Sorry,
if I
Commissioner.
could.
A question too.
Okay, I guess I didn't see you guys. Go ahead.
I'll go first. I was up there before Anna was. I get first.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
I'm just wondering, and I'm sure it's addressed, but I didn't see anything about what is the downstream effects of the dredging operation. You're going to stir up a fair bit of sediments, and that's going to flow downstream. I guess I'm curious what's going to be done with that.
Okay. Let's get that question again answered after the public hearing. And Commissioner Haynes?
Yeah, I have a question about the material that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is it's piled up in the park area, for lack of a better term for it, and then disappears somewhere. I'm just wondering, like, what is that process a little bit? And then is the erosion control part, is there fencing around that somehow, the erosion control fencing?
Yes,
and then
condition
is
12.
it covered as it comes out? So if there's a big wind, it doesn't just blow right back in.
So in part, Commissioner, I know condition 12 talks about the silt fencing that needs to be installed to contain the dredging material. It's not going to be covered. So I guess a strong wind might blow some of it back in, but that hasn't been a problem in the past. After the public hearing, maybe before, because that might answer a few questions that other people have as well. Who wants to go? Adam or Director Kramer? Do you want to talk about the process of what happens with the dredging?
And I will say the applicant is on the call too, if there's any questions for him.
Oh, there he is. Kyle? Sorry, I didn't see you there. It's hard. I've only got 5 little icons and we've got 35 people on. So Kyle, I'm going to turn the floor over to you before we open the public hearing. And hopefully you can address some of the concerns.
So the current plan that Adam had shown on the previous screen includes an area that's sedimented in from the Heffron Street Dam north. And what we're looking at here is a bathymetric map that was taken around 2017. And it doesn't quite show because it's not zoomed out enough, but right where the dredging outline red channel ends down at Heffron Street on the south end, the depth of it starts to pick back up in McDill where we start to reach again to that 8 to 10 to 12 foot depth. So the idea being is that we're going to pretty much match the bottom elevation existing on the south half with the north half. So as far as like the H&H type study that was indicated earlier and what's going to happen down south, I don't think there's going to be any concerns. I think there should be more flow going through the lake. And if anything, it'll just continue to transport sediment how it has in the past, rather than dying out in the north end here and being deposited off the sides. And as far as sediment, being stirred up or going downstream, the process is going to essentially be something that's, a dredge with like a larger boat, and there'll be a vacuum essentially with hydraulic pipes that run back up to the shore. And they will essentially just use that cutting head of the dredge to move through and suck up equipment or suck up material off the bottom. So there shouldn't really be an issue with any sediment being stirred up and pushed downstream. And on top of that, they're going to have erosion control, like turbidity barriers or other things surrounding that dredge as required by DNR permitting. And as far as like material or wind blowing off stuff, once it's stockpiled up, I don't see any concern really there. It'd have to be a pretty big wind to take all that sandy material away. It's in a confined area there with trees on both sides. And it's generally the same process that was proposed in 2002 when they did the large scale dredging out here. So the soil stockpile and the water treatment plant and everything were set up in the exact same locations by the dredge company at that time. So I don't believe there was any issues then. And then material being trucked off, we're going to continue to work with different local contractors to find a use for the material. It's passed all of its NR 347 sediment sampling, so it's been can be beneficially reused for other local construction projects. So yeah, that's kind of an overview.
Thank you very much, Kyle. I appreciate that. With that, now I will declare the public hearing open.
Hello, this is Krista from McDill Lake District. Just to add on for what Kyle also.
Actually, Krista, I'm going to have you wait until the public hearing is closed, please.
Okay.
And we'll see if there's any additional questions. Again, public hearing is open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this project, identify yourselves and provide that testimony. Public hearing remains open. And for the third time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing and hearing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed. Krista, did you have anything to add, or can we bring it back to the commissioners?
I'm going to just bring back also the point, we have been working with Tusinski Excavating, has given us that they have the interest in trucking the material out and providing and working with us for sand sales as they did in 2002. So they do feel confident that with the market and the current conditions, there's a lot of residential projects that the sand is very suitable for, and they should be able to sell that sand off and get it moved out quickly within a few months.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I also have a note here. Alder Slawinski had another meeting. He said that he had no constituents, this is in his district, no constituents contact him in opposition to the dredging process. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Commissioner Hoppy will move approval with the staff recommendations as listed.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Arnson will second.
We'll give it to Commissioner Arnson this time. Thank you. Alder Fischler, you have your hand raised now.
I just wanted to note that nobody had contacted me from my district in opposition to this as well.
Perfect. That's right. There's the other side of the river too. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the dredging operation on McDill Pond. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves, and if you're in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is approved. Item number 7 is on page 120 of your packet, and that's public hearing and action on a request from Ross Rettler, representing Kyle Cluck, for a preliminary extraterritorial subdivision plat review for a new subdivision located at an unaddressed parcel identified in your agenda, located within the town of Hull currently. Director Konoski or Associate Planner Kuhn?
Yeah, good. So what's before you tonight is folks may recall, a little over a year ago was actually, I think, our last in-person meeting of the Plan Commission. We did do a conceptual review of the Two Sisters Kyle Cluck subdivision located just north of Jordan Bar near Jordan Pond out off of Highway 66. At that time, and consistent with what's proposed now, there were 10 residential lots to be created on the 22.32 acre parcel. The lots range in size from 1 acre to 1.12 acres in size, but the remaining land that's around the 10 lots will actually be a common area as well. So it is located within the town of Hull because it's within 3.5 miles of the city's municipal boundary. We do have extraterritorial review authority over the proposed subdivision. This was reviewed by the town of Hull and the Portage County Planning and Zoning Committee earlier this year. So Adam, if you go to the next page, this is just a location. You can see Jordan Bar off of Highway 66. Jordan Pond is to the right-hand side. Next slide, please. The only major difference with what was proposed off of the what was proposed last year and what's proposed this time around is this 20-foot utility easement. Originally, that was a proposed 66-foot wide right-of-way for future road planning purposes. For whatever reason, I know Ross Rutler, who's representing Mr. Cluck, is on the call and could possibly address that. It was reduced down to a 20-foot utility easement for future utility services. City staff recommends that we do require the 66-foot right-of-way extension back into this property. You know, having the right-of-way is an important piece in the event that we were ever to expand further northeast than what's here currently. Having that road right-of-way already dedicated makes future road construction and subdivision construction a lot easier as opposed to cul-de-sacs with a 20-foot utility easement. With that, other than that one minor request for change, instead of the 20-foot utility easement, the 66-foot right-of-way, staff would recommend approval as presented. Again, Mr. Rutler, who's representing Mr. Cluck, is on this call and can answer any questions from the commission. Just like a regular preliminary plat, this does require a public hearing this month, and then next month we'll do the final plat. So with that, we recommend we enter into the public hearing.
Thank you. Before we do that, however, our Public Utilities Director, who oversees our wells, Director Lemke, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
Just that we also got a chance to review it with the staff of community development and with the developer. We don't have any objections to this from a water production perspective, as it isn't immediately upgradient of any of our wellhead.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any clarifying questions? And I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this request, please identify yourselves and provide that testimony. Public hearing remains open. Alder Jennings.
Yes, I have a question. Can somebody remind me if there are basements included in this, what the groundwater level is?
Alder will answer the questions after the public hearing.
I know that.
Thank you for waiting till after the public hearing to ask your question. Public hearing remains open. And for the third time, the public hearing is still open. Seeing no one else wishing to testify during the public hearing, I will declare the public hearing closed. And let's see, Director Konoski or Associate Planner Kuhn, can you answer Alder Jennings' question?
I would actually defer that to Mr. Rutler, who has much more knowledge on the depth of groundwater.
Perfect. Ross, you want to unmute yourself and answer the Alder's question, then we'll go to Alderperson Morrow.
Yeah, so we have not done geotechnical investigations at this point to understand exactly what the groundwater would be at. It is my understanding, however, that there will be basements as part of these homes.
Thank you very much. Alder Morrow, do you have a question?
Yes, one of the, if I remember right, the last time that this came around, I know there was a concern because of the number of, because they would not have any city water, that because the lots were smaller, that was going to cause problems for one of the wellheads. And now I'm hearing from Joel that that's not going to be an issue. I was wondering what has changed since then.
Sure. This is a different area. And as the director mentioned earlier, before the public hearing was open, this is not in the immediate flow. Director Lemke, do you want to maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So previously the land, and I think the confusing factor here is that it's the same developer. So they're getting confused as the same property. They are not. The city actually ended up acquiring the property off of Torren Road for wellhead protection reasons that came up a while back prior to the meeting a year ago that Ryan referred to that we first saw this. So that land was in the exact up gradient flow pattern from well 11. This land is not. It's quite a ways east. The direction of flow from this is almost, directly southeast, I'd say. And there's not much between this land and the Plover River. Certainly not one of our wells or any of the resources that we have out there, which is why we don't have the same concern as we did before, because that was, what we were doing was objecting to 20 some odd septic systems immediately up gradient of well 11, and that isn't the case here. So that's the difference.
Thank you. Alder Morrow, did you have another question?
Yes, I had a follow-up. From one of our previous meetings, I thought that for a septic, that they would need at least a 2-acre lot, and these are 1-acre lots. Is there something different with this than with any others?
Yeah, so county zoning requires properties that fall within ground water protection zone C have minimum 2-acre lots. The county, because the applicant is providing this additional common area, granted the variance away from the 2-acre minimum requirements. As part of the development, that the common area will always remain part of the common and will never be developed. And so that was part of the justification for the county in reducing the total size of lots from 2-acre minimums to at least 1-acre minimums.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
This is Commissioner Rice. I just had a question for the developer regarding, the utility easement, and if there was a specific reason why they went with the 20-foot easement versus the 66-foot right-of-way, as Director Karnowski has suggested that the city would like to see, and if that's favorable to them, or if there is some reasoning that they would like to keep it as the 20-foot easement.
Thank you. Mr. Rettler, are you prepared to answer that question?
Yeah, I don't know if Kyle's on here this evening, but I think the idea behind the easement is obviously we need to convey stormwater. As part of the Two Sisters Court and the development of that roadway, the idea would be to maintain stormwater within the swales on the side of the roads. However, in order to provide overflow for bigger events, we're going to put in an infiltration basin. The idea is to get water to that infiltration basin. So that's the concept behind that easement. At this point, there were not discussions with regards to expanding that to 66 feet for right away.
Thank you. Commissioner, any follow-up or further questions?
Yeah, I guess I would just ask Director Karnowski if he has any other insight as to the practicality of having that easement in the future. I guess just kind of surface perspective, theoretically, if that road did run through to 66 in the future, it might up ending having more traffic than it would as a cul-de-sac. And I know there was at least some minor concern about where the Two Sisters Court emerged onto Jordan Road in relation to adjacent roads. So I guess I'm wondering if he kind of how strongly he feels it's necessary for future access.
Director?
Yeah, I think providing the right-of-way now is an important piece to protecting the future development patterns. Obviously, cul-de-sacs are great for the neighborhood, that provide a low traffic street, but they aren't great in terms of road planning. And so I feel fairly strongly that we need to include at least the right-of-way from the existing cul-de-sac down to the south property line. It really shouldn't impact. I mean, you'll still be able to provide utilities that Mr. Rettler discussed as well. So I would recommend that we continue to impose that requirement on this preliminary plan.
Thank you. Is that listed in the? No, it's not.
So with preliminary plats, Mr. Chair,
right.
We're providing information and we're receiving information from the public. What will happen is once they do the final plat, if they are unable to address it, so this is going to just provide them information, maybe what they should change. But when they get to the final plat phase, hopefully we'll have the road right of way as well. But I would say, recommend approval with that condition if they're able to include the 66-foot wide right of way.
Commissioners?
Commissioner Arnson has a question. I'm looking at the site overview map, and an extension wouldn't necessarily go out to Highway 66. It looks like there's a road or a development right to the south that would intercept that extension. So obviously it would eventually outlet onto 66, but it looks like there's another route. So anyway, it seems like the option for a road extension is reasonable.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Commissioner Arnson, I motion to approve per staff recommendations, including the increased
right away.
Right away. Yes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Cooper. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Commissioners, unmute yourselves. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Item number 8 is on page 58 of your packet. And that is a public hearing and a subsequent action on a request from the city of Stevens Point for a conditional use permit to construct access roads and associated parking spaces at the Stevens Point Municipal Airport with the parcels identified in your agenda. Director?
I will turn this over to the planner.
Dang it. Guessed wrong again.
Yeah, so the last 10 years or so now, Director Lemke, in partnership with his staff, has been working with the State Bureau of Aeronautics and neighboring property owners of the municipal airport for the overall goal to install perimeter fencing along the airport. Now, as Director Lemke can talk about in further detail and what was included in the agenda packet, there have been some land classification transfers that have been occurring over the last few years to work up to this overall goal for perimeter fencing. Now, one of the challenges that when Director Lemke was working with this request was that in order to install perimeter fencing along the airport, part of the Green Circle Trail and the Isaac Walton League driveway would be essentially blocked off due to a portion of those two of the access road and the trail falling within the airport boundary. So in order to address that, the first overall part of this request is to relocate the Green Circle Trail and the Isaac Walton League driveway to the adjacent city-owned parcel directly north of the airport for the purposes of then installing perimeter fencing, but yet not obstructing public access to these two access points. So as you can see on the bottom portion of your screen, that shows the proposed relocation of the Green Circle Trail and the Isaac Walton League driveway, along with a proposed parking lot to be situated off of the access road itself. And again, the image on the left-hand screen shows the approximate location of where the trail and the driveway will be relocated with the current driveway being located where my cursor is, and then the green circle trail being right above here. So overall, I guess just to backtrack here, so this conditional use permit is focusing solely on the construction of the parking lot in lockstep with the relocation of the green circle trail and the access road realignment. The request for the fencing waiver via the site plan review process will occur at during the following agenda item. So overall, staff does recommend approval of the conditional use subject to the conditions shown on your screen.
Thank you very much. With that, I guess let's see if anybody has questions from the commission on the project before I open it. Okay, then I will declare the public hearing open. Public hearing remains open. Cindy, I saw your hand. Yes, there we go. I wasn't sure. I saw it. It was kind of off to the screen. Alder Nabel, go ahead. You have to unmute. Are you able to there you go.
Got it. Thank you. My question or concern would be is the cost of redoing this. There's no other way. Parking lot has to be there. I mean, I'm looking at the cost of moving trails. It's like why we have city planning that we do, so we don't have to redo things. And it just concerns me that that could really affect it in a section. And how much of a section is that? We looked at that to be able to make that change. Is that going to be something we have to wait till next year to do, or cost-wise, because we don't have it planned?
Thank you, Alderperson. Public hearing remains open.
I have a question.
Let's see, that is Brittany's Galaxy phone.
Yep.
Brittany, could you identify yourself, please, and then ask your question? We will
This
answer the
is
questions, however, after the public hearing.
Yep. This is Brittany Alexander with Vice President of the Isaac Walton League. What is the Isaac Walton League going to have to do so that this all gets connected up correctly?
And we will answer that question, Brittany, after the public hearing.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed. Let's see, Director Konoski or Director Lemke, can you start with Alderperson Nabel's question? And then we'll move on to the Isaac Walton League. I think they have a meeting on Wednesday.
Sure, no problem. This is Joel, Director Lemke, sorry. So to the Alder's question first, I mean, there really isn't an action here about financing, but for the sake of answering that question, 95% of this entire project cost is being covered by state and federal funds. A small local share is involved, and the relocation of the trail and the Isaac Walton League driveway has been accommodated through those expenses as to not cause undue expense on them or the city. That effort started about 10 years ago. So that's all taken care of and isn't of any concern. We've got those dollars accounted for. To the question with the Isaac Walton League and Brittany, I apologize. We should arrange a call or something. When we presented to the Isaac Walton League out at the property there, it may have been between elections or however that happens, or in the last season, but we did, and when I say we, I mean the airport manager and myself, come out and present as to the plans, and it was very, I would say, well received and understood. I'm sorry. Oh, Mayor, you're not on.
Thought
you're
I
not
was on mute.
Sorry. Okay. Brittany, feel free to reach out to me at the utility office, Joel Lemke, and I can fill you in if you weren't filled in by the rest of the group. But essentially, there's very little that the Isaac Walton League is going to have to do to facilitate that move. We're going to take care of it inside of the project, and we'll be in touch when there's any short-term disturbances, just to tie in driveways and moving the gate and signage and everything like that. But we have accounted for all of that. So I can definitely answer very specific questions kind of offline here if you'd prefer.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Brittany, you guys have a meeting on Wednesday, is that correct?
We do at 7 p.m.
Are you doing in-persons or are they Zoom?
They are in person.
Okay, perhaps Director Lemke or myself can attend. It might not be in person. We could do it over a phone call or something if that would work. Give me a call tomorrow and I'll make sure because I got to get out there anyway.
Okay, sounds wonderful.
Thanks, Brittany.
Mayor, I'll just put it on my calendar and plan on being there just in case.
Thank you.
You bet.
Sorry about that. My doorbell went off. I thought I put myself on mute, but I didn't click. Any other comments?
Commissioner Arnson, I have a question. I didn't see it directly addressed, but how was the limits of the fencing decided upon? Is it based on property boundaries? Is it based on land usage? I saw an email about limiting public access, and my understanding is the purpose of the fencing is for safety purposes, primarily keeping deer off a runway and random people, I suppose. I'm just wondering if the fencing border is set based on something or if it could be minimized, I guess.
Commissioner.
Yeah, the fencing border is, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the border has been set working with the Bureau and isn't necessarily within the purview of the Plan Commission. That's something that we've been working with Joel on through the zoning code and with the Bureau. So we're looking at just the variation in the fence height and the materials. And then of course the parking lot, not necessarily the location of the fencing.
Director Lemke, I understand that is not in the purview of the commission, but for the sake of and benefit of Mr. Arnson, could you briefly talk about how the fencing boundary was determined? Again, as Director Karnowski said, that is set and not under the purview of the Plan Commission, but I think it might be helpful information.
You bet. The and that all is very well said. And the Airport Commission has met a couple times on this to discuss some small variances in location based on need. But the overall kind of approach at this is that the airport boundary be fenced, give or take, So, cutting in hundreds of feet or over large tracts of land inside of airport property for the sake of doing that is something that wouldn't really be in line with airport planning and grant assurances and all of that. So we are very near the airport property line where it's possible and making small concessions to that where needed.
Thank you. Alder Nabel, I see you took yourself off of mute. Did you have a question?
No, sorry. I wanted to say thank you for answering my question.
Gotcha.
Yep, I'll chime in too. Thanks. All good with that explanation.
Perfect. With that, I'd be, let's see, I apologize. I lost my place on this. Did we already do the public hearing? I got distracted.
Yes.
I thought we did, but I wasn't sure. A constituent showed up at my front door and I had to answer him through the doorbell. Sorry. All right. So commissioners, what are your wishes?
Commissioner Arnson, move to approve. Is there a staff recommendation here at all?
There you go. There are the recommendations right there, 1 through 7.
Yes, then per staff recommendations.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second Mayor Alder Kneebone.
Thank you, Alder Kneebone. Further discussion? Hearing none, commissioners, unmute yourselves. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Item number 9 is request from the city of Stevens request from the city of Stevens Point for a fencing waiver to construct fencing along the perimeter of the municipal airport, consistent with chapter 23.01 sub 14 sub G. Director, anything to add here?
Nothing additional added. It was included in the staff report of item number 8. Would recommend we have the public hearing and approval once the public hearing is concluded.
Director, we don't have a list. The agenda is not listed for a public hearing on item number 9. Is that an oversight?
No, it was included in the staff report of number 8. So if you look at staff report number 8, you have request number 1, which is the public hearing in action for the access road and associate parking space. And then number 2 was a request for the fencing waiver to construct fencing along the perimeter. So this is consistent with our public hearing requirements. We just decided to consolidate paper.
I understand that. I'm concerned that it wasn't listed specifically as a public hearing. I understand the projects are related, but we're going to go ahead and we are going to open a public hearing in this regard anyway. So the public hearing is now open on this particular item. Public hearing remains open.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Todd, I see.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My name is Todd Espany. I'm speaking on behalf of some of the residents along East Maria Drive. I just wanted to say that in the rush to get materials in by the agenda deadline, it precluded a conversation before the agenda went out with Director Lemke. We were able to meet with Director Lemke last Thursday. It was a very productive meeting, and so I'm just offering that we respectfully withdraw those written comments. I yield.
Thank you very much, sir. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing remains open. And for the third time, the public hearing is open. Saying no one else wishing to offer testimony, I will declare those public hearings closed. Bring it back to the commissioners for consideration. Commissioners?
Mayor, I have a question.
Alder Nebone?
If reading the packet, it says that the purpose is to promote safety and primarily prevent wildlife from wandering around the runways. I'm concerned that we have to have 3 feet or 2 feet of barbed wire on the top. Does it have to be barbed wire? It's such a negative. I mean, we don't want it to look like a prison, and I understand if it's necessary, but if you just extended the fence a couple of more feet instead of barbed wire, and maybe it's a cost thing, but I'm not opposed, but I'm sad to see that we have to have barbed wire on the top. So
yes, Alderperson. So in part, it is to comply with Homeland Security guidelines. However, we don't have a lot of threat from that sort of thing here in central Wisconsin at a local municipal airport. Our biggest threat, as defined or outlined in the packet, is really wildlife. They provide more of a risk to the pilots in the airport. In all likelihood, I don't want to say that it's an uncertainty or a certainly not going to happen, but that is in compliance with those Homeland Security guidelines, not just for the deer and turkeys. Director Lemke, anything to add there?
Yeah, that pretty well covers it. Just that where we're allowed to vary from that standard is in areas that are under high surveillance of sorts. So you're right in that game and wildlife has historically been the bigger issue for Stevens Point. Given that the funding mechanism through this is largely state and federal, they're not going to construct a fence that's this expensive without accommodating null threats. And so those areas that aren't under constant surveillance and supervision have to be barbed wire, and those that aren't have to still meet the height requirement. So there are some changes right around buildings and stuff like that.
I figured it probably had something to do with the whole Homeland Security kind of issue, because it is a municipal airport. So it just, it's too bad you have to look at barbed wire, but I completely understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, still looking for a motion. I do want to point out too that while we were talking, we did a little bit more research. This did not require a public hearing, but by doing so, we covered all our bases, I guess. We did more than what was necessary.
Mayor, having spent some time on a flight line myself back in the day, I will move to approve.
Thank you very much.
Subject to any staff recommendations that there may be.
And thank you for your Air Force service.
Thank you.
I need a second.
Cooper, I'll second.
Seconded by Cooper. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Item number 10 begins on page 211 of your packet, and that is a request from DJ Rice Development, LLC, to amend plans for the planned development zoning district, specifically to combine lots 7 and 8, 13 and 14, 15 and 16, 17 and 18, and 19 and 20, to allow for single-family or zero lot line use located on Washington Avenue and 4th Avenue with the parcels identified in your packet. Director Konoski.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Commission and Council may recall, in March of 2018, you folks had voted to approve a future land use amendment, rezoning, and a subdivision plat to allow for the construction of 10 twin homes that would create 20 zero lot line lots for zero lot line development. In 2019, the Plan Commission did approve the amendments to that planned development district to combine lots 9 through 12 to allow for standalone single family development as opposed to zero lot line development. The developer has come back to the city to request the same for the remaining lots to provide some flexibility where if they were to combine lots into one for single family development, or they could also keep it for two family development. This is just an amendment to that. Staff thinks that the project thus far has been very successful. There's 3 two-family homes located on 4th Avenue and 2 single-family homes that have both been constructed along, not Washington, I'm blanking on the street name now, Frederick Street. And so the remaining lots, which are outlined in red, the developer again has asked for some flexibility, whether to be single family or two family. Staff is supportive of this request. Doesn't mean that all 5 will be single family. They could all 5 be single family, or they could all possibly remain as zero lot line two family. So with the success of the project thus far, a number of other external factors, including the impact of COVID-19 on building material costs and cost of housing, and the demand for new single family housing here in the city, we would recommend approval of the change to allow for greater flexibility. We are working on an amendment to the existing development agreement with the developer, and we'll be bringing that forward to finance hopefully next week.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Rice, I am going to make an assumption here that you will be abstaining from this vote. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I will, recuse myself and abstain from discussion deliberation here.
Thank you. Commissioners, thoughts, comments, or a motion?
Mayor, I have a comment and I'll make a motion. I think it's a great idea. We need to be flexible these days, and if we can build, if the developer can build what people want, that will bring them to the neighborhood. So I will move to approve, subject to staff recommendations or staff continuing to work with the developer.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Haynes will second.
Seconded by Haynes. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Item number 11 is on page 232 of your packet, and that is a request from Jim Anderson for a conceptual subdivision plat review of a proposed 39-lot subdivision to be located at 5498 Gala Road with the parcel identified in your packets. Again, this is a conceptual subdivision plat review. We are not approving anything other than the concept right now. That will come back to you at a later date. I will turn it over to Director Karnowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you again tonight is a conceptual review of a 39-lot subdivision. You folks saw this last month. It was originally a 31-lot subdivision, but through some of the comments received at that last conceptual review, there was a concern about density, and then, of course, ensuring that the development pays for itself. And so working with the developer, we've identified the increase in density to 39 lots. So I've outlined the total density. It goes from about 1.31 to 1.63 units per acre. I know we talked a little bit about the wellhead protection implications if this were to be annexed and developed as a 39-lot subdivision last time, and then being able to provide future utility services, not only to City of Stevens Point properties north on Pine Bluff Road, but existing Town of Hull properties north of Fleet Farm and north of the Holiday Inn and Convention Center. There was also a question on whether or not the development would pay for itself. Included in this packet is a memo outlining what essentially the expected costs would be once the development is completely built out. So if all 39 lots were constructed, the total assessed value would be right around $12.5 million. And I've provided just a brief overview of what that could look like for property tax revenue to the city, and kind of broke it down even further and looked at what is the cost to replace the infrastructure. And so with road infrastructure, that comes out of the general fund. With sewer and water infrastructure, that comes out of the enterprise fund. And so that was, although I did the calculations for it, wasn't necessarily included as part of this projection because, again, all of our water and sewer projects come out of the enterprise fund. But for the roadways itself, we did plan a resurfacing, and after 45 years, which is 2068, utilizing the cost per lineal foot and increasing that 2% a year. We came up with a cost of about $721,000 to resurface the roadway. And then after the 90-year mark, with that 2% increase in costs, coming up about 3.8 million to completely reconstruct just the roadway in 2113. We also did include in conversations with Director Badoon a road maintenance cost, which would include snow plowing, patch repair, things of that nature, at starting at about $6 a lineal foot and increasing about 2% a year. Just again, inflation, cost of living, things of that nature taken into consideration. So using that, keeping a conservative city levy increase about 1% a year, we did calculate that the total revenue from this project over the 100-year cycle would be about 21.8 million. Total road expenditures, including maintenance, repair, and replacement, would total about 11.5 million. So there is justification from just the cost of the road infrastructure that this development would pay for itself. This did not include any additional costs for police, fire, or parks. Any expenses the city would take on for building permits is handled through my department with building permit fees, among other things. And so this is just a real overview, 30,000-foot view. Now, in 100 years, I don't know what the costs are going to be. I can generally project what I believe they will be, working with the Public Works and Utilities Director. But that was a question that was brought up, as whether or not the development pays for itself. I will say that this does include reconstruction of Forest Creek Road and Gala Road as well. And so those two roads, it's not just the new road construction, it does include the existing road facilities that if they were annexed, the city would become responsible for. Again, this is a conceptual review, would recommend providing any additional feedback to the developer before he goes through the process of preliminary and final platting, which provided a positive response from this body today, the developer will start to do in the next few months.
Thank you, Director. I know there were concerns about this, and I know you threw out a lot of numbers there, but I want to boil it down a little bit because I think it's important enough to restate that the city's philosophy going forward the past couple of years has been that any new developments need to be sustainable. And by sustainable, we mean the infrastructure that's provided, the roads, the utilities under those roads, police services, emergency medical services, all of those things need to be paid for by the development. We can't put that burden on the taxpayers any longer. And again, summarizing your statements, does this development pay for itself? Director?
Sorry, I was on mute. Essentially, yeah, I mean, I would argue that this does pay for itself. I know there's a lot of conversation about what urban sprawl is, and I would argue that the development that we approved earlier north of Jordan Bar is more like urban sprawl than something like this would be. This is higher density single family lots. I think it's important to also know that a part of what a community has to do with housing is provide diversity. New construction, rehabilitation of existing housing. This does something that we really haven't had in this community in quite some time, and that's provide new single family housing options within stone's throw of a number of amenities. I would also like to state that, you know, we are looking at doing some enhanced pedestrian improvements off of Ben's Lane and Hoffmeister Drive. This will help develop these areas and make them more pedestrian friendly and accessible to amenities like our downtown and riverfront. So yeah, I would argue that indeed this does pay for itself. Just off the bat, obviously these numbers are preliminary, they could change, nobody knows what the future looks like, but using a conservative property assessment that doesn't increase over the 100 years with a conservative city tax levy increase of 1% a year, but with a more aggressive increase in our road maintenance and our cost to reconstruct, it arguably does pay for itself.
Thank you very much, sir. And I understand that reasonable people can disagree on what is growth and what is urban sprawl. Before we go to Commissioner Haynes, I do want to state this is again, a conceptual review designed to provide feedback for the developer prior to a final review. We did get some comment from Trevor Rourke in writing. Those comments will be passed on to the Director of Economic Development, who will in turn provide that feedback to the developer. He was not able to join us this evening. Commissioner Haynes, you had a question?
Yeah, I was not here last month, so I appreciate the higher density that was put in here. I guess my question, Ryan, is how close is the Stevens Point border in terms of annexing this land in the future?
So you can see on the right, well, even on the left-hand side, the blue dashed area is the Stevens Point border. This would require what could be considered a shoestring annexation of Burlowski to connect into the city. Through my conversations with Department of Administration, Adam, go back to the last screen, please. This is justified, or they would have no objection to it because the city also has a subdivision on the north side of this property. So if you look on the north side, on the left-hand side of your screen, you will see that there is a subdivision from the city. This is a rural subdivision. It is not sewered or water accessible at this point, but because we are working towards annexation to provide those utilities to an existing city subdivision, the DOA did not provide any major objections to this, what could be considered a blue string annexation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Arnson has a question or comment.
Go ahead.
I'm not a fan of the balloon type expansion. And, you know, I kind of wonder about the economics maybe, or the feasibility, if we're going to surround that subdivision to the south, that Leonard Street and Joe Street and Emily Court, you know, is that inevitable? And what's the finances associated with that? The other side is there an option for connecting to the city to the west from the southwest corner of the development? I think that's Bannock School over there, tapping down Regent Street. And, you know, going with that, I guess I wasn't clear on having the subdivision to the north. Again, you're talking expanding the utilities a fair bit. And I don't know that I'm against it, but it's not clear to me what all the benefits are.
Sure, Commissioner. And I can tell you that if you look on the map that's up there right now on the, what would be your right-hand side, the shaded area is not the city and the clearer area is the city. So that's what we were talking about with that subdivision to the north. When you talked about Bannock School, it's because that there's an area in the town of Hull there that's not roadway. Roadway and right-of-way is going to be the easiest way to connect this because that's where we're going to run the utilities. It's much more difficult to try and connect it towards the Bannock School area because that doesn't exist as easily. Other than that, I will turn it over to the director to add anything he chooses to.
Yeah, I mean, we had looked at that, Commissioner Arnson, as a possibility. Definitely one of the challenges that we have is the utilities are further down Sandy Lane than what would reasonably we'd be able to provide. The straightest shot and what has been planned for utility extension up Perlowski makes the most sense from just a utility planning perspective. The subdivision to the south is a lot of 3/4 acre lots. At some point, as with a number of other towns and cities that grow up around them, it would make sense for the city to provide municipal services to that subdivision and then subsequently bring them into the city. Of course, state of Wisconsin does not allow what is lovingly referred to as forced annexation. If these properties are going to come in, it's because the neighbor has decided that they want to come into the city. Mainly because we don't have boundary agreements with the town of Hull at this time. But it would make sense, obviously, having a high concentration of well and septic systems on 3/4 acre lots isn't necessarily the right thing moving forward. The subdivision that you discussed, that's Walter, Joe, and a few of the other streets down there, was constructed in the 60s and 70s before the 2-acre minimum within the Groundwater Protection District B was imposed by the county. And so over time, this whole area will likely be provided municipal services and will be annexed. This is just one of those steps to getting there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I guess if I could follow up with that.
Absolutely.
Is the finances, the economics of hooking those up. This new subdivision, you can address the future costs. How would those connecting to existing systems, would that have the same assurances, the pay for itself for 100 years type question?
So Commissioner, very simply, when the people who are not currently connected choose to get connected to the city, they will be then assessed the cost of that. But we don't have the numbers for keeping those connections going in perpetuity. Does that? I know it's not a very clear answer because we don't know that answer. We haven't calculated that, but any costs associated with utilities to the subdivision to the south would be charged those connection costs when that happens. Joel, do you have any examples of something that we might be able to relate to this, Director?
Yeah, you bet. So some of you may recall back 1997 and then several years prior that were of subdivisions that were of reasonable density, and that is the ones from the town of Plover over in the area of Hoover and HH. Some people call it the Flower Subdivision, Howard Ave, Forest Circle, that area, and then a subdivision west of there too. That was all town developed, and then sewer and water was installed, and there was a 10-year annexation agreement, and so on and so forth. And so, the fact that it's already developed, if something did need to happen in the future, the sustainability and the ease of service of that is all related to density of development. And there are several subdivisions in that area that are densely developed enough to make that work.
Thank you very much, Director. Commissioner Arntzen, any follow-up?
Well, yeah, a little bit, I guess. That expansion in town of Plover, the village of Plover you were talking about, that was where I did some of my graduate research, and in the late 80s we surveyed the homeowners and asked what they thought about hooking up to city utilities, and they were pretty uniformly against it. But that was at the time. Subsequently, obviously it worked out, and I can only assume it's good for the city finances, but I think it's a consideration. I don't know that I'd assume that those folks in those subdivisions on Leonard and Joe and whatnot would be readily accepting of hooking up to sewer and water. And is that something that could be done piecemeal, a lot at a time, whereas intervening lots may not get hooked up? Is it an all or nothing type proposition? So again, I don't know, but I'm tossing out these issues.
Commissioner, when you make those comments, are you talking about the town of Hull subdivision that exists already, or the subject property?
The town of Hull properties that exist that could be hooked up in the future once the city essentially surrounds them.
Gotcha. We wouldn't be forcing those utilities on anyone in that subdivision.
I'm sure they'd be glad to hear that. Thanks.
Any other comments? Alder Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. We heard in one statement basically what this is really about. One of the steps to fully annexing land, which would unquote, it would essentially be providing roads and utilities to all of this area. Actually, Commissioner Arntzen is exactly on the right train of thought here. This is not profitable long-term. Mountains of evidence about this. This is classic strong town stuff. And I hope Commissioner Haynes, you're very familiar with this. You've had students who have worked on these kinds of projects. You're familiar with Christine Keller's work on this as well. In addition, by the end of April, we will have a new, the town of Hull will finally have a new chair, someone who is extremely thoughtful, intelligent, and collaborative. And at this juncture, when we have pretty negative relationship with Hull, at a moment when we have a new chair, we're going to launch an annexation war. I think that's a really bad idea. So there's plenty of evidence, tons of evidence to show how this will not pay for itself, how externalities will not be paid for. And again, we know what this is about. It's about further expansion, and it's a step to doing it. Really bad idea. And it's more than just paying for itself. It's about building wealth so that the city can pay for the services that provide better way of life for everybody here. This makes developers lots of money and it makes the city poor. Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed Dave Wills is on the call, who is the future chair of the Town of Hull. Dave, did you have any comments on that? I don't want to have anybody speaking for the Town of Hull that isn't in the Town of Hull.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I really don't want to speak to it this evening. There's an election tomorrow, and I'm not in a different situation until later in the month, as Tori had mentioned. But we're looking forward to discussions with the city on this development and future developments, and hopefully we can work hand in hand with you in the future to try to see if both sides' needs can be met.
Thank you, Dave, and I apologize for putting you on the spot. I happened to see you here, and I didn't want. I wanted you to have an opportunity to speak if you chose to do so. And I apologize for putting you on the spot there. I am sure that we are going to have a great relationship, as we've had with the Town of Hull for the last several years at least. Any other comments or questions regarding this preliminary conceptual subdivision plat review?
Mayor, I have a question. Alder Kneebone here.
Alder Kneebone, go ahead.
I really appreciate the increased density. And I mean, one could say it does smack of sprawl, but there aren't a whole lot of spaces in the inner city to build out. And we need more housing stock. My concern, or something I would relate to developer, what accommodations will be made for walkers and bikers? Will there be a sidewalk on at least one side of the road? I don't know the way it's configured, if it would be a cut through from Gala up to Burlesky to avoid that, but that could increase traffic in there, which might make it not safe for kids on bikes or people walking. So if that's not going to be a requirement, I certainly would hope that the developer would think about doing something like that. Sidewalks anyway.
Thank you, Alderperson. And we're going to make sure that the Director Karnowski shares those thoughts with the developer before the final plat review as well. Any other comments? And thank you, Alderperson, for your insight regarding growth versus sprawl, because arguably you live in an area that could have at one point been considered sprawl. As a matter of fact, many people do who don't live in the core of the city. At some point we had to grow. So I appreciate your insight on that. Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess I'd just follow up one more, is that I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of expansion, and I think the city needs that. And right, the type of lots you'll get out in this neighborhood is different from what you'll get in, you know, my north side neighborhood. And, you know, growth and planning is, you know, a little bit long term, and I'm not a big fan of us boxing ourselves in. But making these types of decisions, I think, you know, takes some thinking and planning, and getting some assurances up front is I guess, my issue. Thanks.
Absolutely, Mr. Arnson. I appreciate your insight. Also impressed that it goes all the way back to the Plover annexation there.
Haynes has one question for Director Karnowski.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
So can you remind us, so this is an extraterritorial plat review, so we're giving, is that correct?
The intention of the developer would be to annex the property into the city, and that we would provide municipal services. So this isn't necessarily extraterritorial. If the developer would choose, they could always go and apply for the 2-acre option that the county provides and that the town hall could review. We would also have ultimate authority over that. And so if this is something that the community is not necessarily interested in from the city's perspective, that is always a path the developer can pursue, is the 2-acre option, which would be less dense, more, I would argue, more urban sprawl-ish as opposed to the 39 lot subdivision. Because at that point, you're probably looking at about 10 lots instead of the 39 lots.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your insight as always. Any other comments? Alder Nabel. You are still on mute.
Found it. Thank
There
you. I'm good at this stuff, boy. My comment I'd like to make about this again is we talk about urban sprawl and other things too, but we need the housing stock, which is definitely true. We've never go back to talking about what are we doing about our stock, our existing stock of housing that could be refurbished. We have money put aside to revamp and have people change some rental properties back into homes. And we have this money set aside, but we have not ever put real teeth into this. And if we need housing, we have houses here. They just need work on them. And we need to look at what we have and start working with that too. So instead of buying something or going in on something where they have to put all this new equipment, new streets, new sewer systems and water, when we have it right here. We in the inner part of this city are paying the highest taxes for our small little lots we have. And I would wish that we would get back to trying to repair what we have and why we have bicycle lanes and all the other things we've done about why it's so important to invest in having housing that's close together and everything else. We have the amenities here. We don't have the houses, but those houses there's a lot of ways that we could be working towards getting some of those houses and having things, again, redevelop some of these areas that they need to be pulled down or whatever it is. Why spend more money outside of the area? I just want to bring that forward again, as that's a concern of mine, that we keep talking about all these extensions, but it's going to cost us all more again.
Thank you very much, Alderperson. Any other comments? Director, because this is a conceptual review, are you looking for approval, or was the feedback provided tonight appropriate?
So the next steps is there's no formal action that needs to be taken.
Thank you.
I will work with Mr. Anderson, who I believe is on this call. We'll touch base with him this week and decide whether or not we would still, or that he still wants to pursue this development. If he does, we would go through the preliminary plat process likely in the next month.
And you've been provided the input and thoughts of the commission and some of the alderpersons, as well as a couple of citizens. So make sure you share all of that with the developer, and we will look for something in the future. Item number 12 is on page 243 of your packet, and that is a discussion only item. There will be no action on this one either. That's an ordinance amending chapter 23 of the zoning code, which is the zoning code of the revised municipal code of the city of Stevens Point, relating to operation of accessory dwellings and commercial units within the city of Stevens Point. Director.
So again, as we discussed a little earlier, this item was brought back right before the pandemic hit. And we talked about accessory dwelling units and providing the opportunity for residents who have lots that are of an appropriate size, the opportunity to build an accessory dwelling unit, which would essentially be typically a smaller secondary place of residence on a single lot, typically detached from the house as opposed to an attached accessory dwelling unit. And so through some of those conversations and through some of, I think, looking at a post-pandemic city of Stevens Point, it doesn't make sense to include not only accessory dwelling units, but accessory commercial units as well. Could you build an office, as an example, above a garage and utilize that for space and not have it count against things like square footage, among others? So what we've done is put together a preliminary proposed ordinance for an accessory commercial unit and accessory dwelling unit. As you can see, definitions are included, where accessory commercial units are a small detached commercial unit that's accessory to the principal residential use on the site. Uses of the ACU are subject to home occupation regulations as defined within Chapter 23. If you really want to get into it, you can look at what home occupation is defined as, how we enforce it, and how we ensure that it protects the surrounding neighborhood. And then accessory dwelling units are defined as a small detached accessory place of residence on the same lot as the principal residential dwelling. ADUs are independently habitable and provide basic requirements of shelter, heating, cooking, and sanitation. Some folks may notice we're very specific in our language, where we only would allow a detached accessory dwelling unit and accessory commercial unit. Part of that purpose truly is to prevent what could eventually end up being a duplex property on a single family lot. And so if it was attached, it might serve as a duplex, as opposed to if it was detached, you're more likely to keep the principal structure utilized for the property owner and the accessory structure utilized as a rental or an Airbnb or things of that nature. We would allow the accessory commercial and dwelling units permitted in the low density R1, R2, R3, R4, and R5 zoning districts. Remember, R4 and R5 are considered multifamily. We have a number of single family homes that are zoned R4 and R5. As it relates to setbacks, ACUs and ADUs would meet the minimum setback requirements for accessory structures of the zoning district or overlay zoning district for which it is located. So if you're going to be building a detached garage and you're in District 3 or District 5 or District 1, you would be able to construct that through other amendments of the zoning code in the last 12 months, 1 foot off the property line, but you could also build an accessory dwelling unit above that. And so as long as you meet those minimum setback requirements, you would be able to construct the ADU or ACU as you see fit. One thing that's discussed pretty extensively is lot size requirements. So what we did, because we didn't want to exclude a number, let me back up. Our zoning code is from 1979 and does not necessarily work with those who are in the core in terms of lot sizes. And so we thought, well, if ACUs and ADUs would be allowed on a lot after meeting the minimum lot area requirements for single family use within that zoning district, that we would allow, let's say, a detached garage with an ADU above it, not exceeding 75% of the total lot area. So that would be any impervious surface, which would include driveways, the physical structures, anything where water couldn't penetrate into the ground. Part of that purpose is for stormwater management, but also ensuring that there is some green space on some of these lots. We would have that maximum at 75%. Number 5, as it relates to the square footage limitations, minimum sizes are really regulated through Chapter 21, but maximum sizes would not be allowed to be any larger than 900 square feet. But if you were to calculate the ADU size, it would not count against a detached structure. So you could have a 900 square foot detached garage, and above that, a 700 square foot ADU. Typically, our zoning code allows for only 900 square foot detached accessory structures. So we wanted to incentivize folks that if you had an interest in building it and that you wanted a larger garage and an accessory dwelling unit up above that, as an example, it wouldn't count against it. Additionally, if you wanted to have a detached accessory dwelling unit that wasn't necessarily on top of a garage and just was a separate outbuilding, if you will, it wouldn't count against any existing detached accessory structures that you have. Height limitations, recognizing that if you're going to add a second story to a garage, we addressed that as well. 20 feet in the height, not including the height of roof gables or the height of the principal building, whichever is less. I could go either way on the height of the principal building. To me, if you're building a 2-story detached garage with accessory dwelling unit, maybe we don't want, especially if you're in the corner of a ranch style home, do we really want to be disallowing something like that. Number 7 is probably the most important, where the owner must occupy either the principal residential use or the accessory dwelling unit. And that would be recorded as a restrictive agreement. So if you were to sell the property, the person who would purchase the property would be aware that they would have to occupy one of the 2 units as well. One thing that I've experienced in working through accessory dwelling unit codes in the past is having a separate utility connection is really important. Let's say future planning, we decide that we want to split the lot out and have 2 separate lots. Having 2 separate meters is important. Additionally, let's say I live in the principal structure, Adam lives in the accessory dwelling unit structure, and I choose not to pay my water bill and it gets turned off. That's not fair to Adam, who lives in the accessory dwelling unit, not being able to have water, as an example. We would allow them for tourist streaming house use, Airbnb, VRBO as an example, and that we would require a permit to be obtained through the Community Development Department. So this is the 30,000-foot overview. We are looking for feedback from the commission before we put it out for formal public hearing consideration.
Thank you, Director. Commissioner Haynes, I saw you take yourself off of mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for doing this. I think this is such a great idea. I think it's offering the city, you know, lots of options for a range of housing. So I think that's great. So my question for you, I like what you have here. I, in general, don't have concerns, but I think it would help me and maybe others to visualize some of what you have here by going through perhaps an example for each of these zoning districts and showing us like, here's what this might look like.
Sure.
I just think that it would help. One, a property owner in the future who wants to do this, I think illustrations could be added to the zoning code. I've seen that in numerous zoning codes and it's very helpful. So that's my comment. I would like to see some illustrations.
Okay,
and,
good.
And, well, one more comment. And
Sure.
Even some illustrations where like, here's an example of a lot with a house on it where this will not work. And maybe that's doesn't need to be in the zoning code, but for us to understand when it won't work.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I spend too much time watching DIY and HGTV. Would this allow for tiny homes? I mean, assuming that you've got the separate utility hookups, I think that's a great idea. But could someone construct a pad and put in the utility connections and then bring in a pre-built tiny home as long as it didn't exceed the size limitations?
No, so what's proposed, it would have to meet the Uniform Dwelling Code. And so let's say we're to literally roll in a tiny home that does not meet the minimum standards of the UDC for home occupation, able to live in that facility year round. And so no, if you were to purchase a trailer, an RV, park it on there and claim it's a tiny home, that would not be permitted within this.
Some of the tiny homes I've seen don't look anything at all like trailers. But I was thinking something more substantial, like not a travel trailer type thing, but more like a built, framed up tiny home. Thank you.
Okay.
We do get a lot of that I call prefabbed, where it does meet the minimum requirements of the UDC. And if they were to build it and it was to be a permanent structure, as long as it meets the requirements of the Uniform Dwelling Code, it would be permitted as part of it, not only the dwelling code, but also the zoning code.
Okay, any other comments? Alder Nabel.
Yes, thank you. I want to say thank you to Commissioner Haynes for saying something that I think is very important. It is hard to not worry about it without seeing a picture of seeing how this works, because in District 3, we are very tightly close together as it is. And my concern would be a couple things. One is, what if somebody only resided in their house 6 months out of the year and then are gone the other 6 months? Second would be the occupancy allowed. It's pretty, right now, I know that's going to be something that'll be challenged later on about what the definition of a family is. Right now, it's two unrelated people, no more than 2 unrelated people. Are you going on that basis at this point here too? And my last question, sorry, as I read this, was it's hard to understand the square footage when you say we have to go back and look at chapter 2108 of the revised municipal code to have something that's really clear cut, like the illustrations. It really shows that what would that look like in my district, because R3 is very tight, and we already have so many rentals, and I don't want to think people couldn't have that opportunity to have somebody living with them if they have the space for it. But I also don't want to see it get abused either. So that's my concern. So having those illustrations to me and exact how much square footage and everything and how many people could reside in it would be very important to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Shore.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Director Konoski and his colleagues for this work. I'm really excited about it and supportive of it. It's interesting to see the commercial piece, the workspace piece. Trends are changing really fast after the pandemic. So a few thoughts. I mean, one reason that I am so supportive, and District 2 surely, has, its share of very small lots, is related to what we've been talking about in some of the other discussion. The need to increase supply. This is definitely connected to trying to have more affordable housing in the community. That this issue came up was raised with me in sort of a age-in-place, multi-generational context, and that's a piece. But having an income unit is another important piece. And the only one last thing that I would mention is that as part of that opening up, giving more options, making housing more affordable, is the issue of whether we want to keep the single family zoning the way it is. It's an issue that's coming up in this very similar connection all over the country. So thanks again.
You are very welcome, Alderperson. You were cutting in and out a little bit. You may want to check your Wi-Fi connection. Any other comments? Okay. This is, I don't
Alder Naval has an additional comment.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I didn't come back through the.
That's all right.
Go ahead, Alder Naval again.
Thank you. I'm sorry again, but I also want to bring back to our housing study, or the city planning study that we did in, I think, 2019, which definitely said that the area around the university is the area that they were not for looking at. That should be separated from some of these other areas of where the sizing of family, unrelated people, or to adding on other ability to add more rental property into the area because of it being so overly percentage-wise compared to other neighborhoods, that they had suggested that you go outside of R3 and look at more at your R2s and 1s for those kinds of adding on of housing or making duplexes. But that was their recommendation at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Nabel. I appreciate that. Any other comments? I'm going to go through the whole list again to see if I see anybody with hands up.
So while you're doing that, Mayor, I think what I'm gathering here is before we would publish this for public hearing, maybe bring it back with some visualizations for the commission. I'm seeing some head nods, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do some really colorful pictures and provide additional information and before we take it to the public hearing portion.
Thank you. And I don't see anyone else, so I'm just going to take a minute and provide some comments of my own. The housing options that we have in the city vary greatly. And the need or what people are looking for also varies greatly. On one hand, we talk about infill development in the core and working with our existing neighborhoods to provide those houses and housing options. This provides some additional housing options, as Alder Shore had mentioned. On the other hand, people also seek out zero lot line houses or duplexes, which is what we talked about with the Rice development. And still other people want a slightly larger yard, maybe a little bit further out of the core of the city, away from some of the light pollution, or maybe some of the general activity that goes on in those denser areas, which is what we get with the Anderson proposal. We have to remember that our housing options need to vary because not everybody fits in a cookie cutter urban dense environment or an accessory environment or a tiny homes, and tiny homes are being requested too. All of these things are what we're trying to address, and that's why you see a great variety of these developments, because we're trying to meet the needs of the demands that people have. We can't say that only core infill is the way to go, because it's not. People want other options. So we're trying to provide those options in the best way we can. And again, this opening these accessory units up for the possibility of housing, some people want that. So we're trying to accommodate that. And that's all we're looking for here. So Director, I think you've got a little bit more work to do. We will schedule another presentation prior to an actual approval. In the meantime, if anyone does have comment, maybe you're watching the meeting later and not live, or you're hearing about it through some other media form, provide any insight you choose to Director Karnosky at the Community Development Department. Contact your alderperson and they can relay it on, put it in writing or an email, send a letter, whatever it happens to be. We will take that input and try and incorporate it into our proposal. Number 13 is the director's report. Director, report.
All right, my report is included in your agenda packet. Adam Kuhn and I had the opportunity to tour the Berkshire Senior Housing Project a little bit today. It's an incredible building. We were just happened to go up on the 5th floor and stand on some of the balconies and take a look at the views. And it is an excellent, excellent development project. And I give kudos to Mr. Kearns and Mr. Ostrowski prior to my tenure at the city for putting that deal together and helping to bring it to fruition. So with that, there's nothing significant to report other than community development is now open 5 days a week. We are hitting our stride with our busy season. And so 7:30 to 4 p.m. each day, Monday through Friday, we'll be open to the public. I believe that's all I have for this report, other than what's already included.
Thank you very much, Director. And that was one of the things that I was going to conclude with as well. As of today, everyone over the age of 16 who chooses or wants a vaccination is eligible to receive a vaccination. I would encourage everyone who is able to get vaccinated. That's our quickest way out of this. It takes about a month for the Moderna, a month and a half for the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. Johnson & Johnson's a one and done. But we're close to being able to reconvene or start having our meetings in person again. I expect that June will likely be a hybrid or July, depending on how things go. So I wanted the commissioners and the public to be aware of that we are working on a plan to resume meetings in person over the next couple of months, at least starting in a hybrid option before going back fully. So take that bit of information and run with it. And with that, we are adjourned at 7:56. Thank you all very much for your time.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.